Well, good morning, all of you beautiful people out there in the Temecula Valley, and welcome to our weekly Godcast. This is something new that we're trying, and today is the first day. So I hope that you can hear and see me just fine. So I wanted to pick up on some of the conversations we've been having as a church over the last couple of weeks. And one of the things I mentioned just the other night is this idea that prayer is a subversive act. And so I thought I would take just a minute this morning and tease that out a little bit and share with us kind of what I mean by that. So there's a great passage that I want us to go and look at here. It's in Daniel chapter 10. And let's just read this. And here's how I want to kind of tie this together. Oftentimes, as we've discussed, we think of doing what God wants us to do as as an action, right? As an act of perhaps of our will, or maybe it's a task, or that it's something that involves movement, right? Ambulatory movement. I go somewhere or I say something. And of course, as we've discussed, there are times for action, that discipleship is something that is lived, it's something that is walked, it is called the way, right? Which implies travel and forward motion. And at the same time, one of the most powerful and subversive things, maybe the most powerful and subversive thing that we can do as a follower of Christ is to pray. And prayer is something many times that we do alone or we do in groups, but it almost never involves what we would call physical action. It's a contemplation of the mind, right? It's a direction of the will, and it's a reorientation of my hopes and my desires heavenward. So here in Daniel 7 or Daniel 10, let's read this passage. So Daniel is having he's having this vision, right? And it's the third year of the king of Cyrus, and you can look up the history on this text. But Daniel, it says, Daniel, was the only one that saw this vision, and the men that were with me didn't see it. But when they did realize what was happening, they were overwhelmed and they fled, Daniel says. So I'm left alone with this great vision in verse 8. I had no strength left, my face turned deathly pale, and I was helpless. And then I heard him speaking. And as I listened to him, I fell into a deep sleep with my face on the ground. A hand touched me and set me up trembling on my hands and knees. And he said to me, Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words that you have heard. I have come in response to them. Since the first day you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself, your words were heard, he says, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me for 21 days. Then Michael, the chief of the princes, came and helped me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to explain what will happen to your people in the future, for your vision concerns a time yet to come. Much could be said about this passage, but I want to highlight a couple of things. First of all, this idea that prayer is a subversive act. That if you read this context carefully, what you'll realize is that as Daniel prays, history changes. History changes. World powers are impacted. That Israel's history is redirected because Daniel took the time to pray. That Daniel changed history. And you go, well, but I pray and history doesn't seem to change. Well, what I want to suggest is that delay may just be relay. That delay might just be relay. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, here in the text that we just read, what you see is that Daniel, he prayed, but it was 21 days later before the angel came to him and shared what was going to happen. And if you continue to read, what you'll realize is that Daniel's prayer is going to be answered in the distant future, right? That if Daniel was looking for a response in the moment, he was going to be disappointed. But the delay between what I feel like is my moment and when things actually change, that God sees that very differently. And for God, who is eternal and lives outside of our human timelines, delay might simply be a relay. And so I want us to stay hopeful and realize that when you pray, it is a subversive act. That as you pray, things do change, things do happen. God does hear, but his timing is oftentimes very different than ours. And that's okay. That's not a reason to lose hope. So thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that this little piece of thought helps you this morning as you're thinking about praying, as you're contemplating whether your prayers, in fact, are heard or anyone experiences them and the goodness of them in the moment. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back again next week.